After years of business trips, she follows him to find he's living with another woman just 50 feet away. Both women were deceived. What happens next will shock you. I never thought I would be the person to say this, but I caught my husband living another life with another woman. And not just anywhere. Right across the street from our house. How did I miss it for so long? Let me tell you how everything fell apart. My name is Sarah. I'm 34 years old and I've been married to David for 8 years. We live in a nice neighborhood with rows of similar houses where everyone smiles and waves, but nobody really knows what happens behind closed doors. At least that's what I thought. David is 36, works in software sales, and travels a lot for his job. Or so I believed. We met in college and got married soon after graduating. The first 5 years were great. We bought our house, settled into our careers, and planned to start a family soon. David was always a bit distant, but I thought that was just how he was. Some people aren't very open with their feelings, right? That's what I kept telling myself. The problem started about 3 years ago when David's work trips became more frequent. He would be gone 3 or 4 days each week. Sometimes he'd call to check in, sometimes he wouldn't. When he was home, he seemed tired and lost in thought. I tried to talk to him about it many times. I remember asking him one night, "Are you happy with me? With us?" He looked surprised and said, "Of course I am. I'm just stressed about work. The company is pushing for higher sales numbers and there's a lot of pressure." I believed him. Why wouldn't I? He was my husband and I trusted him completely. That was my first mistake. Last winter was when things got worse. David started working late, even when he wasn't traveling. He became protective of his phone. He would take calls outside or in the bathroom. If I came near when he was texting, he would quickly put his phone away. Classic signs, I know now. But when you love someone, you make excuses for their behavior. My best friend Jen noticed the changes in David before I did. We were having coffee at my house one day when she carefully brought it up. "Sarah, I don't want to upset you, but have you noticed anything different about David lately?" I remember feeling defensive right away. "What do you mean?" "He just seems distant when I see you two together, and last week when I dropped by his car was gone at 9 p.m. on a Tuesday when you said he was working from home." I made an excuse about a late meeting, but Jen's words stuck with me. I started paying more attention. David's stories about his trips didn't always add up. Sometimes he would mention staying at a hotel in one city, then later refer to it as a different place. His expense reports that I occasionally saw didn't match the cities he said he visited, but the real wake-up call came from an unexpected source, our new smart doorbell. David had installed it, saying it would help us feel safer. The doorbell had a camera that recorded whenever someone came to the door or when there was movement nearby. It sent alerts to our phones. One day I was at work when I got an alert from the doorbell. I opened it, expecting to see a package delivery. Instead, I saw David walking out of our house at 11 a.m. on a Tuesday. He was supposed to be in Chicago for a 3-day business trip. My heart started racing. Why was he home? And where was he going now? I watched as he got in his car and drove away. I couldn't focus on work after that. I called his office and asked for him, using an excuse about a family emergency. The receptionist said, "David hasn't been in the office today. Would you like his manager instead?" I hung up without answering. My mind was spinning with questions. If he wasn't at work and wasn't on a business trip, where had he been going all these times? That night, I checked our bank statements and credit card bills going back months. There were hotel charges, but they were all local, within 20 miles of our house. There were restaurant bills for places in our own city on days he was supposed to be out of town. I felt sick to my stomach. The next day, I called in sick to work. I waited for David to leave for his supposed business trip. He kissed me goodbye, wheeled his suitcase to the car, and drove away. I waited 15 minutes, then got in my car and followed the road I thought he might take. I drove around for almost an hour with no luck. He could be anywhere. Defeated, I headed back home. As I turned onto our street, I noticed David's car. It was parked 2 blocks down from our house. I slowed down, heart pounding in my chest. I parked a safe distance away and walked toward his car. It was definitely his. I could see the small dent on the back bumper from when he had backed into a pole last year. But why would his car be here if he was supposed to be on a plane to Boston? I looked around at the houses nearby, wondering which one he might be in. That's when I saw him. He was walking out of a house across the street from ours, number 37. Our house was number 42, almost directly opposite it. I ducked behind a hedge, watching as he went back to his car, took out his suitcase, and carried it to the house. He used a key to open the door, looking comfortable and familiar with the place. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I just stood there, frozen behind the hedge, watching my husband enter a house that wasn't ours with a key that I didn't know about. The worst part? I recognized that house. A woman had moved in there about 3 years ago. I had never spoken to her, but I had seen her getting her mail or watering plants in the front yard. She was pretty, maybe a few years younger than me. Somehow I made it back to my car. I sat there shaking, trying to make sense of what I had just seen. Was David having an affair with our neighbor? But this seemed like more than just an affair. He had a key. He brought his suitcase there. It was like he lived there too. I drove to Jen's house because I couldn't bear to go home. When she opened the door, she took one look at my face and pulled me inside. What happened? Are you okay? I tried to explain through my tears. David, he's not on a business trip. I saw him go into a house across the street from ours. He had a key. Jen sat with me for hours as I cried, raged, and tried to understand. She offered to let me stay with her, but I knew I had to go back home eventually. I couldn't hide forever. That night I lay awake in our bed, looking at David's empty space beside me. I checked the doorbell camera footage again and again, and watching him leave our house that morning. Then I checked our street-facing security camera. Over the past month, there were at least 7 instances where David's car could be seen parked near house number 37 on days he was supposed to be traveling. The next day, I decided I needed more information before confronting him. I called my sister Amy, who lives 2 hours away. I told her everything and asked if she could come stay with me for a few days. Having her there made me feel stronger. Together, we did some investigating. We learned that house number 37 was owned by a woman named Rebecca Taylor. She was 30 years old and worked as a marketing manager. Through social media, we discovered she had moved to our neighborhood 3 years ago, right when David's business trips started becoming more frequent. Amy suggested we watch the house. So we did. For the next 2 days, we observed from my bedroom window, which had a clear view of Rebecca's house. David came and went freely. Sometimes he wore different clothes than what he had on when he left our house. He seemed relaxed, happy even. On the second day, we saw him leave with Rebecca. They walked to her car together, and before getting in, he kissed her. Not a quick peck, but a long, loving kiss. The kind he used to give me. I turned away, unable to watch anymore. Amy held my hand. You need to confront him, Sarah. This isn't right. I knew she was right, but I was scared. Scared of what he would say, scared of what it would mean for our marriage, scared of losing the life I thought we had. I decided to wait until his supposed trip was over. According to his original schedule, he was coming home Friday evening. I would act normal until then, gathering more evidence if I could. Wednesday night I couldn't sleep. Around midnight I got up and went to the window. The light was on in Rebecca's bedroom. I could see shadows moving. I felt sick imagining David there with her while I was alone in our bed. I made a decision then. I wasn't going to wait until Friday. I needed answers now. I got dressed quietly, took my phone and keys, and walked across the street. My legs felt like they were made of lead. My heart was beating so hard I thought it might burst from my chest. This was it. The moment I would confront the truth. Standing in front of Rebecca's door, I hesitated. What if I was wrong somehow? What if there was an explanation I hadn't thought of? But deep down, I knew. I rang the doorbell. Long seconds passed. Then I heard footsteps. The porch light came on and the door opened. David stood there wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt I had never seen before. His face went pale when he saw me. Sarah? What are you doing here? I couldn't speak at first. Seeing him there, comfortable in another woman's house in the middle of the night, made everything real in a way that watching from a distance hadn't. Finally, I found my voice. I know, David. I know everything. He stepped outside, closing the door behind him. You shouldn't be here. Let's talk tomorrow when I get back. Get back, I repeated, my voice rising. You're supposed to be in Boston, but you're here in this house with her. How long has this been going on? Before he could answer, the door opened again. Rebecca stood there looking confused and a little afraid. She was wearing pajamas and had clearly been in bed. David? Is everything okay? He turned to her. It's fine, Becca. Go back inside. I need to talk to Sarah. Rebecca looked at me and I saw recognition in her eyes. She knew who I was. Had David told her about me? Did she know he was married? David, who is she? Rebecca asked, her voice shaking. I didn't wait for him to answer. I'm his wife, I said, staring at her. We've been married for 8 years. I live right there across the street. Rebecca's face crumpled. She looked at David with shock and betrayal. Wife, you said you were divorced. You said the papers were finalized last year. Now it was my turn to be shocked. Divorced? We weren't divorced. We weren't even separated. What had he been telling her? David stood between us, looking panicked. Both of you, please. Let's talk inside, not out here where everyone can hear. I was about to refuse when I noticed lights coming on in neighboring houses. People were waking up because of our raised voices. The last thing I wanted was to create a scene in front of the whole neighborhood. Reluctantly, I followed David and Rebecca inside. The moment the door closed, Rebecca turned to David. Tell me this isn't true. Tell me you're not still married to her. David sat down heavily on the couch, his head in his hands. I'm sorry, Becca. I should have told you the truth. Which is what exactly? I demanded, standing with my arms crossed. He looked up at us, these two women whose lives he had been juggling. I couldn't choose, he said simply. I loved you both, but in different ways. Sarah, we've been together so long we have history. And Becca, with you everything felt new and exciting. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. He was acting like this was a normal situation, like he had a right to live two separate lives. So your solution was to lie to both of us? I asked. To pretend you were traveling for work when really you were just crossing the street to be with her? He tried to explain his twisted logic. At first it was just an affair, but then it became more. I didn't want to hurt either of you. I thought I could make it work. Rebecca was crying now. I didn't know, Sarah. I swear I didn't know. He told me he was divorced, that his ex-wife lived in another state. He said he traveled for work, which is why he couldn't be here all the time. I believed her. The pain and shock on her face were too real to be faked. She had been deceived just as much as I had been. We sat there in Rebecca's living room, three people whose lives had been built on lies. As the night went on, the full picture emerged. David had been living this double life for nearly 3 years. He would tell me he was going on business trips, then stay with Rebecca. When he told her he was traveling for work, he would be home with me. He had created elaborate stories for both of us, keeping track of his lies with careful notes in his phone. The man I thought I knew, my husband of 8 years, was a stranger to me, and as Rebecca shared her side of the story, I realized he was a stranger to her too. He had crafted 2 different versions of himself, giving each of us what we needed to keep us from asking too many questions. As the first light of dawn crept through the windows, I felt exhausted but somehow clearer than I had in years. I looked at David, this man who had broken my trust in the most complete way possible. I need to go home now, I said, standing up. This conversation isn't over, but I can't do this anymore tonight. David started to get up. I'll come with you. No, I said firmly. You won't. I need space. I need time to think about what happens next. Rebecca spoke up, her voice steady despite her red eyes. He's not staying here either. Not after this. David looked between us, suddenly realizing he had nowhere to go. The double life he had built so carefully was collapsing around him, leaving him with nothing. As I walked back across the street to my house, our house, I felt oddly calm. The worst had happened. The truth was out. Whatever came next would be difficult, but at least I wouldn't be living a lie anymore. I didn't sleep that night after leaving Rebecca's house. How could I? My entire world had been turned upside down. I sat at our kitchen table watching the sunrise, trying to make sense of what had happened. My husband, the man I had built my life with, had been living a completely separate life just steps away from our front door. My sister Amy found me there when she woke up. She took one look at my face and knew something had happened. I told her everything. The confrontation, Rebecca's shock, David's weak explanations. She held my hand across the table, not saying much, just being there for me. Around noon my phone rang. It was David. I almost didn't answer, but Amy encouraged me to talk to him. I put the phone on speaker so she could hear. Sarah, can we talk? David's voice sounded tired and strained. Where are you? I asked. I'm at a hotel downtown. I needed a place to stay. I couldn't help but laugh, though there was no humor in it. Finally on an actual business trip, huh? He ignored my comment. I want to explain everything. I owe you that much. We arranged to meet at a coffee shop. I didn't want him coming into the house yet. Amy offered to come with me, but I knew this was something I had to do alone. The coffee shop was quiet for a Saturday afternoon. I spotted David at a table in the corner. He looked terrible, unshaven, wearing the same clothes from the night before. Part of me felt a small satisfaction seeing him suffer. Another part, the part that had loved him for so many years, felt sad seeing him this way. I sat down across from him, not speaking first. Let him do the work, I thought. Thank you for meeting me, he began. I know I don't deserve it. I just want answers, David. The truth for once. He nodded, looking down at his untouched coffee. It started 3 years ago. I met Rebecca at a conference in the city. She had just moved here and didn't know many people. We started talking, and there was a connection. Was that before or after you told her you were single? I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice. He winced. At first I didn't tell her I was married. By the time she found out, we were already involved. I told her I was unhappy in my marriage, that we were separating. I thought about all the times during those years when he had seemed happy with me. Vacations we had taken, holidays we had celebrated, quiet nights at home when everything seemed normal and good. Had all of that been a lie? Why didn't you just leave me? I asked. If you wanted to be with her, why keep up this whole charade? David looked up at me, his eyes red. I did love you, Sarah. I still do. That's the most confusing part. I didn't want to lose what we had. So instead you lied to both of us for years? How did you even manage it? The logistics alone. He explained his system. He had 2 phones, the one I knew about and another he kept at Rebecca's. He had created a fake travel schedule that he shared with both of us, making sure we each thought he was away when he was with the other. He set up email alerts for the doorbell camera so he would know when I was checking the footage. The level of deception was breathtaking. This wasn't just a man who had made a mistake or had a brief affair. This was calculated, planned, maintained over years. What about your job? I asked. Were you actually going on business trips at all? He looked ashamed. Some of them were real. About half. The company did have me traveling, just not as much as I made it seem. I would extend trips by a day or 2, saying I was still away when I was actually with Rebecca. And no one at work ever questioned this? He shrugged. I met my sales targets. No one cared about the details as long as I was bringing in business. I sat back, trying to process everything. Each answer he gave seemed to reveal new layers of deception. I thought about Rebecca, wondering if she was having a similar conversation with David, getting her own version of the truth. Did you ever plan to end it? With either of us? Or was this just going to go on forever? David ran his hands through his hair. I don't know. I kept telling myself I would figure it out, make a decision, but the longer it went on, the harder it became to choose. Choose, I repeated. Like we were menu items and you couldn't decide which meal you wanted. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like, David? Help me understand how you could do this to people you claim to love. He struggled to find words. At first it was exciting. The newness with Rebecca, the comfort and history with you, but then it became like quicksand. Each lie required another lie to cover it. I was constantly worried about slipping up, saying the wrong name, mentioning something that happened with one of you to the other. Good, I thought. I hope it was exhausting. I hope it ate away at him every day. Were there others? I asked suddenly, besides Rebecca and me? No, he said quickly. Just the 2 of you. I searched his face for signs of another lie, but saw only exhaustion and regret. Still, how could I ever trust anything he said again? What did Rebecca say after I left last night? She kicked me out, he said simply. Said she never wanted to see me again. I nodded. At least she had self-respect. I wasn't sure yet what I would do, but I understood her immediate reaction. We talked for hours in that coffee shop. David answered every question I had, no matter how painful or embarrassing. He told me about how he balanced the 2 relationships, about the lies he told to keep us both from discovering each other, about the guilt that grew with each passing year. By the end, I felt drained. The anger was still there, but beneath it was a profound sadness. Not just for me, but for all 3 of us. David had wasted years of our lives with his deception. Years we could never get back. I've booked a hotel for the next week, David said as we prepared to leave. I'll give you space to decide what you want to do next. What I want to do, I repeated. Do you think there's any coming back from this? He looked at me, a glimmer of hope in his eyes that made me furious all over again. I don't expect forgiveness, Sarah. But I needed you to hear everything, to understand. I understand that you're a liar who is perfectly happy to keep deceiving me if you hadn't been caught, I said, standing up. That's what I understand. I left him there and drove home, my mind spinning with everything I had learned. Part of me wanted to go see Rebecca, to talk more with the other woman who had been deceived just as thoroughly as I had been, but I wasn't ready for that conversation yet. The next few days were a blur. I took time off work, telling my boss I had a family emergency, which wasn't far from the truth. Amy stayed with me, fielding calls from concerned friends and family members. I wasn't ready to explain to everyone what had happened. David sent texts asking how I was doing. I didn't respond to most of them. What was there to say? Each time my phone buzzed with his name, I felt a fresh wave of anger and hurt. On the 4th day after the confrontation, I was getting the mail when I saw Rebecca coming out of her house. Our eyes met across the street. For a moment, we both froze. Then, surprising myself, I raised my hand in a small wave. She hesitated before walking toward me. We stood awkwardly on the sidewalk between our houses. The physical space between us seemed to represent the strange connection we now shared. 2 women who had unknowingly shared a life with the same man. How are you doing? I asked finally. Terrible, she answered honestly. You? About the same. A ghost of a smile crossed her face. Has he been texting you too? I nodded. He wants to explain, again. She shook her head. I blocked his number. There's nothing more to explain. I admired her certainty. I was still caught in a web of confusion and pain, unsure of what to do next. Do you want to come in for coffee? Rebecca asked suddenly. It seems like we have a lot to talk about. I hesitated only briefly before nodding. There was something appealing about talking to the one person who might truly understand what I was going through. Rebecca's house was was lovely inside, decorated in bright colors with lots of plants. It was so different from my home with its neutral tones and minimal decor. I tried not to think about David moving between these two spaces, adapting to each environment like a chameleon. We sat at our kitchen table, 2 mugs of coffee between us. The conversation started awkwardly, but soon flowed more naturally. We pieced together the timeline of David's deception, filling in gaps in each other's knowledge. I was living in Austin before moving here, Rebecca explained. I met David at a marketing conference. He said he was from here and lived alone. When I mentioned I was looking to relocate, he suggested this neighborhood. He even helped me find this house. I felt sick imagining David helping her move in just across from where we lived. The boldness of it was almost impressive in a twisted way. "Did you ever suspect anything?" I asked her. She sighed. There were signs. The way he could never stay over certain nights. How he would sometimes seem distracted or check his phone constantly, but he always had explanations that made sense at the time. I nodded, understanding completely. When you trust someone, you accept their explanations. You don't look for hidden meanings or lies. We talked for hours, sharing stories about our relationships with David. It was strange how we could laugh sometimes, recognizing his habits and quirks in each other's stories. Other times we would grow quiet, the weight of his betrayal settling over us again. By the time I left Rebecca's house, something had shifted. The raw pain was still there, but I felt less alone. She and I had formed an unexpected bond, united by our shared experience. The next week was a turning point. I had a long conversation with my lawyer friend about my options. David had been calling and texting, asking to come home, saying we could work through this. I wasn't sure what I wanted yet, but I knew I needed to protect myself. I decided to change the locks on the house. David had keys to Rebecca's place. Who knew what other secrets he was keeping? Amy helped me find a locksmith who could come right away. That night, David called again. This time I answered. "I tried to come home today," he said. "My key didn't work." "I know," I replied. "I changed the locks. Sarah, please. We need to talk in person. I've made terrible mistakes, but I want to make things right. How could you possibly make this right, David?" He didn't have an answer for that. "I don't know, but I want to try. I love you. I've always loved you." His words, which once would have meant everything to me, now rang hollow. Love didn't do what he had done. Love didn't build a life on lies. I need time, David. I can't see you right now. I hung up, feeling stronger than I had in days. For the first time since that night across the street, I was making decisions for myself. Rebecca and I continued to talk. We met for coffee or walks, processing our shared trauma together. People in the neighborhood must have thought it strange, the wife and the girlfriend becoming friends, but their opinions didn't matter to me anymore. Through our conversations, I learned more about the David that Rebecca knew. He was different with her, more spontaneous, less serious. With me, he had always been dependable, steady. He had created 2 versions of himself to match what he thought each of us wanted. 2 weeks after the confrontation, I agreed to meet David at our house. I was ready to talk about what would happen next. Amy had gone home, but she made me promise to call her right after the meeting. David arrived looking better than he had at the coffee shop. He had gotten a haircut and was wearing clean clothes. He stood uncertainly on the porch, waiting for me to invite him in. I led him to the living room but remained standing. This was his home too, at least legally, but I wasn't going to make him comfortable. "I want a divorce," I said without preamble. "I've already spoken to a lawyer." The hope that I had been visible on his face when he arrived drained away. "Sarah, please, can't we at least try counseling? 3 years is a long time, but the 5 before that were good. We had something real." "Did we?" I asked. "Or was that just another performance? Another role you were playing?" He flinched. "That's not fair. What we had was real. I made terrible choices, but my feelings for you were never fake." I couldn't tell if he was still lying. That was the worst part. I would never know for sure what was true and what wasn't. "Either way, I can't do this anymore, David. I can't look at you without seeing all the lies. I can't trust a single word you say." He tried once more to change my mind, promising therapy, transparency, a fresh start. But I had made my decision. The marriage had ended the moment I saw him kiss Rebecca outside her house. Everything since then had just been paperwork and details. Finally, he accepted that this was happening. We talked about practical matters. The house, our finances, the separation of our lives. It was strange how calm I felt, discussing the dismantling of our 8 years together. Before he left, he asked one more question. "Are you and Rebecca friends now?" I considered how to answer. "She and I understand each other in a way no one else can. We're helping each other heal from what you did to us. I don't know if that's friendship, but it's something." He nodded slowly. I'm glad you have someone to talk to, even if it's her. After he left, I sat alone in the quiet house. For the first time in weeks, I felt peace. The future was uncertain, divorce, selling the house, starting over, but at least it would be my future, built on truth rather than lies. The next day, Rebecca and I met for our usual coffee. She had news too. I got a job offer in Chicago, she told me. I think I'm going to take it. There are too many memories here. I felt a surprising sadness at the thought of her leaving. In a strange way, she had become an important part of my healing process. That's probably for the best, I said. A fresh start. She smiled. What about you? Will you stay in the house? I'm not sure yet. Part of me wants to sell it and move somewhere new. Another part wants to reclaim it as my own space. We talked more about our plans, both of us moving forward in our own ways. As we were leaving the coffee shop, Rebecca turned to me. You know, in some weird way, I'm glad I met you, not because of how it happened, but because you helped me see the truth, and because you're the only one who really gets it. I nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. We had been brought together by betrayal, but had found something valuable in our connection. 6 months later, my divorce from David was finalized. Rebecca had moved to Chicago, but we still texted regularly. She was dating someone new, taking things slowly, learning to trust again. I decided to sell the house. There were too many memories there, both good and bad. I found a small apartment on the other side of town and started rebuilding my life piece by piece. David moved to another state. He sent me an email before he left, apologizing once more and wishing me happiness. I didn't respond. Some bridges can't be rebuilt once they're burned. Looking back now, I still struggle to understand how I missed the signs for so long. How did I not notice my husband living another life right across the street? But I've stopped blaming myself. David was the one who chose deception. He was the one who couldn't be honest about what he wanted. Sometimes I drive by our old house in Rebecca's former home. The new owners have no idea about the drama that unfolded there. To them, they're just houses on a quiet street where neighbors smile and wave but don't really know each other's secrets. I'm still healing, still learning to trust again. But I'm also stronger now, more aware of my own worth and what I deserve in a relationship. The pain doesn't define me anymore. So was I wrong for what I did? For confronting him that night? For becoming friends with Rebecca? For walking away from my marriage? I don't think so. When faced with a life built on lies, sometimes the only right choice is to tear it all down and start over with the truth. What would you have done in my place?